Okay, welcome back. We're live on oneclimate.net. We've been with you all of last week, and we'll be with you to the end of this week. We're talking about climate change. We're at the UN climate change negotiations in Durban, South Africa, and now we're joined by two of the young people here at these negotiations. We're joined by Fernandez, who's part of the U.S. youth delegation, and Songqiao Yao, who's with the Chinese youth delegation. You guys have you've just come out of a workshop between the U.S. and Chinese youth. We've heard a lot about the importance of U.S. and China working together here in the negotiations. Tell us a little bit about the workshop you were just in, Songqiao.
Oh, sure. So this is our third workshop of U.S.-Chinese youth workshop that we're putting together at COP conferences. And what we just did is that we invited, I think it was a group of like 30 or maybe 40 Chinese and American youth, and we invited 3 speakers who are experts on the negotiation to give us an update and call to action to Chinese and U.S. youth. And then we broke into 3 discussion groups talking about how do we work with government, how do we influence more youth, and how do we work on a long-term basis to further promote sustainable development and address climate change in our respective countries.
So Laura, what did you take out of this workshop?
Okay, what I took out of this workshop, I was working specifically on long-term cooperation, and it is very impressive to see all the topics that we have in common, and we just were able to keep talking for hours there, but our time was limited. But my impression was that we have common responsibilities because we are citizens for countries that are the biggest polluters in the world, so I think we have common responsibilities. However, in another way, we also have different political situation in each of our countries, so I think there is a gap between those two things, and we're trying to bridge those gaps and build bridges. So I think from the workshop in long-term cooperation, we got a lot of really good ideas in order to involve youth in China and youth in the U.S. to become involved in the local communities and to influence their respective governments in regards to environmental policies. So we came up with really good ideas in how we can use social media to keep communicating in between COPs, so it wouldn't be just a thing of becoming involved and being connected at COPs, but also in that year between...
The COP being this conference here, the Conference of Parties, where
Exactly.
the UN, where everyone comes together to negotiate once a year.
The climate change conference. So maybe just trying to keep in touch between that year and work on joint actions, share information, build personal relationships, and keep youth informed about other conferences that are going on around the world in regards to sustainable development or climate change, for example.
So, what are the overall goals of this workshop process? What would you like to see come out of this? What would you like to see your governments hearing from this process?
I think it is important that our governments know that we are aware of the situation in regards to the environmental crisis that the world is facing, and that as youth from the U.S. and China, we are aware of that. We are calling our governments to tell us how we can be part of that solution and how we can collaborate, and that we as youth, we are working in our local communities at home, at the local level and the national level as well, to just call on government to start acting, and how important it is for us, because we are the ones that are going to be part of the crisis in the next few years, and we are the next generation, and we are going to be the ones that inherit the problem of climate change.
Songqiao, what are you calling on the Chinese government to do?
I think the youth of the Chinese youth delegation recognize that China is still a developing country, and although we're the biggest emitter per capita GDP and GNP, China still has a lot of domestic complexities, and there's a big disparity between rich and poor, and people all wanting to have a bigger lifestyle. So we're actually, as youth, we're facing with a difficult challenge now, and China is also making a lot of domestic efforts that may not sometimes be recognized on the international stage. But we do recognize the achievement, but we also recognize the gap. So as youth, we want to work towards helping strengthen the government's effort and helping them bridge the gap, because only the top-down approach is not enough, and we need more participation from the public, from the youth. So I think our youth, we had a few dialogues with the negotiators from the Chinese government, and also with Minister Xie and other members of the delegation. And it's very clear they recognize our voices as well, that we as youth, as Chinese youth, is participating in this process, and we want to help China achieve sustainable development. And policy alone is not enough, and youth are making the efforts as well.
Do you feel like your government is doing enough on climate change right now?
I can say that I think all governments are not doing enough in the world. I think China is doing a lot in relation to its capacity. It is really trying to push for its target and is having strong laws being implemented right now. But I think as a climate activist and as a global citizen, I don't think any government on this planet is doing enough right now for youth, for the future generation. So we're calling for action to all governments and all negotiators in the room.
Laura, I see you nodding your head. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do agree with that. Coming from the U.S. and as a SustainUS delegate, I think within our...
SustainUS is a youth organization in
Yes.
the United States.
Yes, SustainUS is a youth organization that calls for sustainable development. So we have a youth delegation here representing the U.S. among other organizations that are also from the U.S. So as a SustainUS delegate, I believe that there is no one country that is doing enough, and especially coming from the U.S., I think, for example, China, with its capacity, it has a big population. I think they're on their way to sustainable development, but for example, their population growth maybe is the obstacle towards that. In our case, I think it's the political gridlock in our country, especially from the political side, and I think that's where we have a lot of common things that we can help each other. For example, China is leading the way maybe in many environmental innovative technologies, and I think that's something that the U.S. government can share with China, for example, like technology transfer, and then we can share some of our knowledge in the United States.
How do you feel about the United States' role in these negotiations here? Do you think your country is playing a productive role here?
I don't know if we're playing a productive role because we are not part of the Kyoto Protocol, so it's hard for us to be completely active. But I think there is a lot being done in regards to getting informed on what's going on in other countries and just knowing maybe what are the next steps that we have to take in order to reach or to become involved in a compromise in the next years. That's what we're calling, as youth, we're calling for something before 2020, because I think 2020 is a year that is too late to wait. So we are putting a lot of pressure on that, not only to the US, but example in China as well, and to other countries that are going to have a big role in the political arena of environmental policy in regards to mitigating climate change. So I do think the United States, at least they're having the representation here, and they're trying to look forward and see what can be done next. But I think we're moving a little bit slow, and we have to just start catching up with other countries that are leading the way in environmental governance around the world.
And Songqiao, how do you feel about China's role in the talks here? Have they played a constructive role here?
I think the Chinese delegation has announced that China is willing to consider legally binding agreement after 2020. I think China was trying to make an effort to actually achieve the agreement, but I think China also has a strong position about trying to getting what was agreed in Copenhagen and in Cancun implemented before agreeing on a new legally binding agreement. I think a lot of times in the international negotiations, people really only focus on the outcome. I feel like a lot of the small details, if you follow the negotiation closely, a lot of the details in the LCA and KP group has achieved a much progress. But the overall legally agreement that maybe medias are just so focused on hasn't really got too much of an agreement. But I think China is taking a more positive role and is trying to play a constructive role. And also, if you go to side events, and this is the first time China is hosting a China Pavilion and really demonstrating a lot of the domestic efforts. I think if you go to China Pavilion, if you go to the side events, you can see there's a lot of actions taking place in China by civil society groups, by local government, by the private sector that are showing promises. I think, yes.
And this is the first time for both of you to be at one of these climate change negotiations. You were at some of the meetings that led up to this one, but neither of you have been to one of these full Conference of Party negotiations before. What are your impressions, Songqiao?
Well, I think it's very great to see so many minds and talents and all the different actors interested in climate change, trying to work towards it, all gathering in the same space. I think it's very exciting for the Chinese youth. We're trying to interview as many people as we can, get as much knowledge as we can. It's very easy to just pop into someone and learn a lot about what is happening in the world. So I think this is just a great space for learning, for youth to gain experiences and to be inspired as well. Although in the conference room, sometimes things get very slow, things get into, people get into arguments, but outside, the side events, the exhibits are very exciting.
And Laura, what do you take away from this? Has it been what you expected?
I think it has been more than that. It is really exciting, and that youth especially are very well organized, and we have youth from around the world, and it's really interesting to share the experiences of what youth are doing in their local communities in their respective country. Also to take away a lot of the information and to learn a lot from the side events, as Songqiao mentioned, and also to go inside the UN process, into the negotiation rooms and the plenaries. I think it is a composition of a lot of things that are very, very informative. So side events, negotiation rooms, and just being involved with the youth. So it's a very complex process that I can take a lot from, and I can go back to my local community or to my home country and just tell youth how it is here and how we can come here in the next year or attend other conference that work to mitigate climate change, and I think the experience loop here is very well taken, so we can go back to our local communities and also to try to get more youth involved, so we can all fight for the same cause of just having a better planet and a more sustainable world.
We've heard a lot over the past week about the importance of youth raising their voices and having their perspectives heard, because really this is about the youth. It's the youth that will deal with these issues for many, many years to come. So let's leave it with this. What is your message to the negotiators here?
My message to the negotiators is that you guys need to do something. This is something that you guys are creating for us, and you guys are the ones responsible for the things that will happen in the next few years, especially with temperature increase, and you guys are giving us the problem, and we don't think it's fair, and we are here to help you and to be part of the solution, and that's why we're raising our voices, we're having actions, we are doing workshops in order to capacitate ourselves in a better way, so we can go back to our countries or to work with other Jews in long-term cooperation, so we can all be part of the solution. We're not here just to stand around and to look to see what's happening. We're here to help you, and we are all very educated. We come from different backgrounds, and there is a big diversity, and I think that makes a really strong position for youth as a whole.
Songqiao, what's your message for the negotiators here?
I think we want to remind all the negotiators here that we are here because we see the common threat that humanity is facing, this environmental crisis, what climate change is bringing to us. When we're here for a common goal, to reach an agreement, to actually solve this problem. And I think people sometimes get too trapped into the small national interests or details of the text rather than forgetting the big picture. And I think youth are here to remind people that we're the next generation and you have to be responsible for us. Maybe the past generation has created all the problems, but we working together to solve it. And that's the goal of the conference, not just your national interests. So really focusing on the big picture and see what the planet is facing and help to solve that.
Great. Well, may your U.S.-China cooperation be a model for the negotiators here. Hopefully they can learn something from what you guys have done here over the past couple hours and over the past week or two. So there you have it. It's the voice of the youth. Now we're going to go back to an interview we shot earlier today with. We're going into the Cannes press conference. This is the umbrella group of NGOs, activist organizations here, who really call it straight. They tell you they go into the rooms every night. They hear what's happening in the back rooms of the negotiations, and then they come out every morning and they give a debrief and they talk and they give you their take on it, and they talk about whether or not things are moving ahead quickly enough. So we're going to bring you that now.